Hey, so it's Yohei from 8 Values. I wanted to talk about some UI updates for 8 Values today. Now, this is the homepage right now of 8 Values. Now, I really like how people can search through their just job preferences on the homepage with their values and if they want to work remote or not. But one of the difficult things about creating a website like this is that people that come to this website, they don't know how it works because they don't spend as much time on it as I do, of course. And a lot of people come to this website through just like job searches, right? Or on Google especially. And so if somebody's searching for a remote developer job in Japan, let's say, they come to this page, right? And the bad thing about this current website design is that the actual jobs are not on the first page or on the first view. And so they have to scroll down to see the thing that they searched for, right? And so with this new redesign, I'm going something like this, where the hero banner is much, much smaller, and on the first view, they'll get exactly what they're looking for. I think it's an overall cleaner design for what I'm trying to do. And I'm going off of this Figma file that I have here. And it's kind of nice. I think it'll help people find stuff easier. And I think one of the cool things about this website is that I guess what it's really trying to do is to tell developers what the culture and the team is like before they apply, right? And so we have these like values that are really just a gateway for the engineers on the team to explain like how they think about software design and how do they think about their culture, especially from the point of view of somebody that actually works there, right? As opposed to some HR person writing down what they think is the developer culture. I think there's a bit more fidelity and truth to what the developers say. And so you can understand who's on the team and who is on the team through these kind of in-depth interviews. And so I asked them about why they like a particular aspect of their culture. I also have these kinds of shorts here as well, because sometimes not everyone wants to go through an hour-long podcast interview, right? And so it's kind of able to segment for each kind of job applicant. And of course we have the jobs here as well. But yeah, so I guess what 8 Values is trying to do is to, marry all kinds of, media formats in the goal of getting developers to understand the teams that they apply to. Right. And so I think one of the reasons why I started 8 Values was because there was a developer who joined a previous team of mine, and they went through a really full interview process, multiple interviews based on technical screens and cultural screens. And they met almost every person on the team, and they got to ask their questions. But this person ended up hating the engineering culture, right? And I feel like we could have done a better job explaining to this person what we thought about a good engineering culture and what we thought of as our kind of particular traits as a team. And this developer came from the US, right? And so they joined the team and then they quit. And I thought that being in Japan, in a foreign country, with no safety net, this thing really matters, right? The companies that you apply to. And if you think about it as a whole, from a company's point of view, if a developer leaves, the company's fine, right? It's a pretty robust system. There are a bunch of other people to take up the work and to take up the slack. But from like a developer's point of view, like losing your job is like not a small thing, right? That's huge. And so like companies can be cavalier towards this kind of stuff. Like, oh, like, like we'll just find another developer, but it's not a good practice. And like, I don't think it's a good thing to do, to be kind of like obscure and like unclear about, your culture and how you work, right? Because like your work can be a source of huge happiness or a source of a lot of suffering, right? And so basically my job is to help companies create this kind of content so that developers understand like where they're applying to. And like sometimes like I say it's cavalier, right? Maybe the companies don't care about the kind of like suffering a bad culture fit can experience, but it's also just a hard problem in general, right? So I have a lot of sympathy for that as well. Like it's not easy, right? Like how can you be super accurate about explaining this like amorphous like thing called the culture, right? Because it really depends on like the people that are there on the team, and then also like their kind of like work processes, and like it's hard to write that down, right? And like we do our best to do that as well, and like that's why we do the video interviews and we do these kinds of like written profiles. But even then, right, it's not like 100% like accurate, or like I don't know, like just by going on 8 values, you're not magically going to have the same like knowledge of a workplace as somebody that actually works there. So I would keep that in mind. But look, like the value proposition for companies like can be quite attractive, right? So for most of these companies, they're trying to compete in a technical like recruiting market space where like other companies have bigger brand names or have more content out there that really explains their culture and like, I don't know, the attractiveness of this company, right? And so like that's why like, I don't know, companies like Google, like I assume have no problem recruiting developers, right? Because they're a famous company, right? And there's already like a prestige and a high status and a high salary that's associated with their company. But like for most of the companies, like that's just not the case, right? Like they don't have anything out there. They're just like, they don't know how to, I don't know, get their name out there and create like kind of an HR brand or like a brand for developers in Japan. And so my value proposition to companies is basically this, like I'll create everything for you, create all the content for free. But in exchange, like what I want is in-depth information about your culture that I can give to my customers, which are developers, right? And like, that's it. Like that's kind of the whole ball game, right? Of course, there are like specific things in sales or specific things in marketing that I'm still doing and that I need to continue working on. But that's kind of the name of the game, right? And like right now, it's really particularly difficult because I have 2 companies on here right now, right? Which is Amtalk and Restar, right? And for a job board, like what most developers do is they either look at multiple job boards or they look at like a few, right? And what really matters to them is, of course, depth of information. I'm sure like that's not a negative, but it's also selection, right? They want, like what a job board does basically is to make it easier for people looking for jobs to find them in one place, right? So you don't have to go to like 1,000 different career pages. I'm like, that's a part of the value add, right? For sure. And the more companies you have on your platform and the more distribution you have, the more, let's say, like power you have to convince companies to go through the laborious process of like writing out their culture and like to be recorded on interviews and all of this stuff, right? And so that's basically where we are right now. Like I think one sign of, I don't know, something like rather unhealthy in the like tech recruiting space is that like the people that apply to jobs, right? Like they go through these interviews and like that's like the accepted format, right? Because like I don't know, maybe that's the best there is, but I really don't believe that to be the case. Like it's a strange thing when like developers talk about like reverse interviews and like I don't know, like here are the questions you should ask in an interview, right? And like, there's never enough time, or like the developers don't even know the right questions to ask, anyways, right? It's like, because imagine like you're trying to make a good decision about the company that you join in like 5-10 minutes or something, of like at the end of the interview, right? Because those interviews are mostly geared for companies to assess the candidate, right? And not so much the other way around. And so like I'm sure a lot of these companies, like they answer the same questions about their culture. And like what 8 values like is basically telling them is record that stuff and like put it out there so that everybody can understand like what your team does and how they work and like what they believe in, right? And like ideally, like what happens is that if you have a unique culture that you put out there, like the people that want to work at your kind of workplace will come work for you. And like once they join your company, like there's a lot less like change that has to happen for the developer to adapt to your work style. Because like for a lot of these companies, like they have to train new candidates into their style of working, right? And like it's quite a hairy process, right? Like there's like, I don't know, of course, like performance reviews, one-on-ones, and like feedback and all of this stuff that is a part of managing developers in general. But like ideally you would go to a place that really aligns with how you work from the get-go, right? And so that process is much easier. Like I'm sure like developers stay longer at places where they enjoy the culture and the team, right? And so like a part of 8 values is also like getting to know the team members, right? Because like what is a culture but something that is made up of people? And like if you like the people that you work with, like that goes like a long way for developer happiness. And so that's why. But I think, yeah, I'm going to continue recording these videos just because. But honestly, like leave a comment, ask a question. I'm totally open about this stuff. I think I'm going to try to do this like at least once a week, just to keep you guys updated about what's going on here. But yeah, all the best. Thanks for listening.